of having 30 plus students each, but then, you know, how do we do this without a master teacher? How do we do this without the support that we were kind of expecting? I think that's definitely something, and I don't think I'm alone in that. I think other teachers are feeling that as well, just with like, you know, we aren't really sure what to do with this, and we're not really sure what it looks like. And that's a scary place to be in September.
Yeah, no, we agree completely.
Yeah.
And we know that we're not the only district facing this. My husband,
Oh, 100%.
His fellow fourth grade teacher quit on Friday, like that day quit. And so they have no subs. So he now has 54 students in his classroom.
Good.
They said, we don't know when we're going to have somebody. So good luck. Right. So we know that this is, you know, it's a prevalent problem, and it's not even just Arizona. Unfortunately, this is across the nation. Yeah. They're trying to think, how are we in front of this? So we brought ASU out, the people who've been working on next generation workforce, and we actually got a chance to go into Erin's classroom and talk with her a little bit. And thanks again for that, Erin. It was totally unannounced, but we just figure we have a thought partner to help us kind of think through, what are we missing? What are our blind spots? Because we're so used to a certain way of doing things. And at the end of the day, they said the same, you know, it's kind of like, yeah, right now it's tough when you don't have a lot of staff. And she would say, well, what about, and we'd say, well, the issue with that is we only have one teacher at that grade level. Oh, all right, well, what about, and we'd say, well, the challenge with that is, so we are, you know, we've been in cabinet nonstop for the past 3 weeks, literally, and just really trying to, you know, think through what are all the different ways that we can think about staffing configurations. So we, you know, we said at the beginning of the year, we were going to level classrooms. We don't have staff to turn, I mean, we can't level classrooms because we don't have enough staff to do that. So it's just, we're not giving up. We believe that there's a solution, and there's, you know, the more we have these kinds of conversations and the more we start thinking about what are creative things that other people are doing, we'll figure something out. But we know that our teachers need more plan time. We know that our teachers need to be supported to do multi-age if we're going to do multi-age well, because it's honestly, given the numbers of students we have and the numbers of staff we have, that's the best formula at this point. But we've got to be able to support it and to make sure that it happens in an authentic way. So we're just working through all of those challenges right now. And I don't think any of us anticipated the shortages would be this drastic last year.
When I chatted with you guys and the next generation workforce person.
Lisa.
Sorry. Yeah, Lisa. I was unclear. Are we an official partnership with them, or we're not?
No, we're not. And we're not in part because when we were first talking about this idea, we got pretty immediate feedback. And I think it might, Marnie, you may have remembered this, or maybe it was Erin. We were in a meeting and somebody said, don't do next generation workforce. It's horrible. It's gone terribly in these places. So we backed way off of that. That said, we are looking, you know, we potentially want to send a group of people who want to start doing some teams. And Erin, Edison is probably the best position to be able to be a team. And then there are other exploratory groups. So for those people who want to do exploratory, we want to send some people to look at that. But one of the models that we do see that is a challenge for us with next generation workforce is the number of staff that they have in a classroom. And so that's where we keep falling short.
Is the next generation the 3 teachers?
3 teachers and well, 1 teacher and 3 associate
interns.
teachers typically.
Yeah. Okay.
And so it's the 1 teacher guiding instruction, but there are different configurations, you know, so that's part of why we want to do the exploration and particularly looking at how are we teaming together.
Yeah, I did that the last year prior to the pandemic. Well, the last couple of years. And that's the other thing too, Erin, like, we totally do recognize about the multi-age and the challenge, especially with the math, so like, just know we are talking with leaders and teachers to let them know, like, that we're flexible on that math side to help make it manageable for them. And if that is not going to be manageable for them, then they need to let us know so we can sit down and brainstorm a different avenue for them, because the structures we thought we were going to have in place, and you remember this summer, Aaron, I kept saying, go small, like, this isn't for everybody to jump into as we're building, we need to do it small. So we do recognize that what the plan was and then what the reality was is two different things. And those were out of our control because of some staffing things. So people just need to let us know if they're struggling and what they need. So my team's kind of focusing on that 3rd through 5th grade band, because 6th grade is still departmentalized, as far as looking at like what centers do we need and those things. So please reach out. And then I'm also going to send you guys that at the next master teacher, we'll be working on the MCLOI, because that will be your piece. Sorry, not to get off the freeway of all teachers, but.
No, that's helpful. I will say, like, personally, and from like other people around the district, it's like we jumped into the, master teacher multi-age thing, and I am a strong advocate for it. So I think it's a good place to set our sights, but I think that we have some lacking in like support just from like a very basic structure. Like, what does this look like? What can we do? Yeah. So I personally think like a partnership with somebody who could help guide us would be really great. Or maybe, I don't know, maybe there's other models of that to look for, but just some more guidance.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think we just have to be cognizant of the fact that we're taking our first baby step into this, because it's not the kind of thing that you can just flip a switch and you have multi-age classrooms or team teaching. You really have to build the infrastructure and the will to do this. And Erin, to your point, we don't have principals who are ready to support this. And on the other hand, we have principals who think, oh, multi-age, I'm just going to put 3, 4, 5 together, and they'll be multi-age, and we're going to continue to do business as usual. Well, that's not even a combo. That's a threesome. and it's an awkward threesome. So as we think of, we have to be intentional in taking small steps to understand what works, where do we have the foothold. And that's why I think, if we can get a partnership with Next Generation and we can get a team of people invested in going to this, they become the model for the district. Because one thing that ASU will tell you, and any of the research that you look at, they will tell you, you have to build it yourself. You can't, it's not a cookie cutter. And so, but as a district, we can build once we've got that foothold in what works and why it works.
That makes sense. I think that's exciting. John, I noticed Marnie left. So I know she said she had to go to the IEP. Did she like leave you with instructions?
Not per se, but I'm guessing that we could just kind of, have a conversation that continues.
Yeah.
And, goes in whatever direction it would need to go in terms of the district. So I do have a question. And it's kind of a broad question because I'm like a 30,000 feet kind of guy. So when I look at the C&I stuff that you guys provide, I love it just because I like to get in the weeds stuff. And I think that you guys throw a lot of resources onto the website, and that allows teachers to like process things in different ways. But from your perspective, what do you think would be best practices in terms of if you're a new teacher or even not a new teacher, and you're saying, hey, this is a resource for you. There's this C&I page, go there, click on your grade. What do you think would be like a best practice in terms of like, should they start with standards? Should they start with like, what's the best way to engage with that? Or should they just kind of like, I noticed that you guys put updates on there, like, this is what things we've added recently. I know Teresa's done videos. what do you think is the best way for a teacher not to be drowning, but to be able to kind of keep their head above water and swim?
Well, from my opinion, you start with the standards. So the reason why we wanted to move to the focus standard was because all of the curriculums are overwhelming for the teachers. So it is very hard for them. And the feedback that we received last year was that, you know, we saw too that we were going lesson to lesson instead of looking at what the standards are. The math we're still working on because that still follows more of the scope and sequence, but we did try to put the domains together for those that are doing multi-age. But I think with anything, like if we want to teach our kids to be innovators and problem solvers and thinkers, then we need to provide those opportunities for them. And to me, that goes by teaching standards using the curriculum, but having specific strategies that teachers can use. So that is the next layer that we're working on, is what is the strategy? It doesn't have to be that strategy, but you know, being able to support teachers with strategies that they can use to teach the standards and digging deep to the standards and breaking them apart. Otherwise, it becomes all of these lessons and they don't know how to move kids forward or how to fill the gaps.
And one of the things I would say, you know, when you're first, and I keep going back to remember Harry Wong, the first days of school. I think that use of routines and procedures, if sometimes this works. Apparently it's not going to work right now, but going back to routines and procedures, because even when we're teaching standards, we have to have routines and procedures that allow students to understand, how do I ask a question?
Yeah.
How am I encouraged to ask questions? What happens if I don't understand something? What happens if I have an idea and I want to share it? Developing those structures for new teachers or for any of us in the beginning to really help students, especially right now, feel like the classroom is a place where I can connect, where I'm seen, where I'm heard, where I'm valued, and where my ideas are heard, seen, and valued when I do it respectfully. But I think the pandemic, we are seeing more high level sorts of social emotional issues coming up with students, even more so this year than we did last year. We've almost quadrupled the number of threat assessments that we've done just in the first month of school. So you think about that, and I come back to how important routine and procedure is for students, because during pandemic, kids had free reign to do whatever they wanted. And when they came back, I think we all were sort of like, we're very tentative about everything. And then you also had a lot of fluctuation. We're absent today, we're in school today, we're absent again, we're here again. Kids are coming and they haven't had time to socialize. They haven't had a lot of supportive adult interactions. They haven't had supportive peer-to-peer interactions in many cases. And so the more we spend time on building that routine and procedure about how do you work together, how do you collaborate, and all in the vein of work on academics. One of the things I keep saying is we can't have social emotional taught over here and academics taught over here, because then they're going to constantly be like this. We need to bring them together so that it's like chips and salsa. They're paired together and they work together. So I would say, focus on routines and procedures while teaching the standards and really think through, this is the standard I have. So what is it going to look like? And how do you break that down for kids? When you know how to do this, you're going to be able to X, Y, and Z. And this is how you're going to be able to test that you got this, so that they are owning and having agency for what they're doing. I think that's a great question, John.
Okay,
And it's huge.
yeah. So just to kind of follow up to that, so as I was looking through the resources, one thing that kind of struck me was, and it's weird because you guys were talking about like, these are things that we got completed and these are things that we're working through. And I think that when you're looking at a site like that, you can never know what's a finished product and what's something that's evolving. So I looked at, I think it was, I had it up a second ago, hang on one second, because I want to make sure that I'm referencing this properly. So there's a focus standard, there's like a document, a Word document with a focus standard, and then there's a Word document that's a progression document. So my question when I looked at that was, it showed sort of the standards, it showed sort of like a timeline for when you wanted to get through the standards, when we can expect to CFAs, but I didn't see a connection to the actual curriculum. So my question, like, hey, you should be on this week of benchmark, or you should be on this week of iReady. So my question is that something that we just haven't gotten to yet, or do you not find value in that? And does that kind of leave the teachers a little bit of leeway to sort of use the curriculum they see best for their classrooms? Or I guess, what was your take on not sort of integrating the curriculum into either the standard document or the progression document?
So the iReady lessons are linked on the standards progression. So if I do you want me to share? Oh, you can't see me. Can't
Yeah, I
share
don't know
my
if we'll be able to see it, Teresa.
But if you click on the math focus standard calendar on the website, under the math, it'll say what lesson goes with it. For the ELA, we broke it down more into short read 1 and 2 for week 1, extended read 1 for week 2, and extended read 3. Extended read 2, extended read 1 is week 2, extended read 2 is week 3. And then week 4 was when they could compare and contrast and also bring in other areas of interest. I think one of the things that we were talking about, it kind of goes back to what Deborah was talking about teaching the kids how to collaborate and become the thinkers and the problem solvers is, how can we set up systems so kids can build their background knowledge prior to jumping in those texts? So we were trying to have more of the opportunity for kids to dig deep, because when we were going into benchmark, and a lot of the feedback that we were getting from benchmark is there's a lot of standards and a lot of little lessons that spiral, but how do we teach kids to be able to read different texts and have a choice in it? So if we're reading something about government and kids share a special area of interest that they're interested about, or something happening in their community, how can we go pull in an article from New Zealand into it as well too? So that was kind of the feedback we had gotten throughout last year, and why we moved away from teaching the lessons according to how the curriculum was laid out and providing opportunities to bring in other pieces of curriculum.
Okay.
So kids could have more choice.
And this is, I think you'll understand where this is where it gets a little bit tricky, because last year we had classrooms that were still on unit 1 by the November break. They
Lesson
hadn't moved forward. That's
Yeah.
why, we want to create something. On the other hand, I never want us to be the kind of district that's, it's week 1, so you all have to have finished this by the end of week 1, and now it's week 2 and you all have to be here. That doesn't allow for us to meet the needs of our students where they are. That forces us to kind of follow, oh, too bad they didn't get it, we're going to keep on moving. And that's antithetical to the kind of district I want us to be and the kind of learning that I want our students to experience. So it's trying to find that tricky balance between what is, let's give people some wiggle room between that learner progression. But if we don't understand what the learners are needing to be able to come to that standard, we are just going to keep pushing them through, and that's not going to help them either. So we've just got to find that balance. And this is where, we've got to trust teaching professionals. You know your students, you know the curriculum, you know what excites them. How do you engage your learners in ways that are meaningful?
Okay, and following up with that, I'm glad you brought that up, because with there being a pacing to the CFAs, how would you best advise a teacher who feels like their kids aren't ready to take a CFA that may be kind of penciled in at a certain time? do you feel like they should just sort of slide everything and sort of say, okay, maybe the rest of the fourth grade on this week is taking the CFA, maybe you should take it a week later? Or just how do you handle that? How would you advise someone to handle that?
So Teresa may have a different response than I. But one of the things I would say is if your students are not there, you should know before it's time to give the CFA whether your students are ready or not. So if Wednesday's coming and you look and you're like, oh, they still don't have this yet, I'm going to go ahead and continue teaching and I'm going to skip the CFA. Give us a heads up. Hey, my kids are here. This is where they are right now. I just don't feel like it's a great recipe for success. I'm going to skip this week, but I promise you by next week, I'm going to be set and we're going to be ready for the next CFA. Because the CFAs, particularly in ELA, are building on the same standard, that shouldn't be an issue for you to miss one. Now, if 3 weeks goes by and you're still not progressing, now we have a conversation to say, hey, let's figure out what's going on. Your kids seem to really be struggling. Let's come and watch some lessons. Let's see if there are ways that we can help support. We see a pattern if that happens. But we do want to be able to provide CFAs, and we're customizing the way that we're doing it in math because we do recognize that there are different configurations of the ways in which math is being taught. With Erin doing 3, 4, 5, is that right? Yeah, 3, 4, 5. We have to look at the domains differently. So her CFAs are going to be slightly different than the regular CFAs that a traditional straight third grade might be doing. So we want the CFAs, the purpose of the CFA is to give you information about how your students are doing so that you can look at the learning progression and put students in the best place for their success on their grade level standards. Remember, we're trying to get kids grade level standards plus all of the enrichment or remediations or interventions that they need. On this, at the same token, we have to have flexibility to be able to meet students where they are and to allow for that lag occasionally. We shouldn't be seeing lag all the time. As a district, we're looking at that data, we're pulling it up and being able to say, okay, this is a concept our kids are really struggling with across the district. What do we do to fill in that gap? Because it looks like the curriculum is not getting us there. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah. Mhm. Is there a best pathway? I mean, is it kind of like, because you were talking about how like, hey, if there's an issue with you doing the CFAs on time, kind of communicate with us. Is there a way, is it mostly just through the schools of like, hey, I'm kind of feeling like, because I know obviously you guys are having us all take the CFAs sort of at the same time. So you can say, okay, well, this school's doing it well, that school's struggling. What's this school doing, that school's not, and being able to compare it. Is it best to just kind of stay in the vein of your own school and go through your own administration, reach out to you guys? Like, what's the best? Because I don't want you guys to be overwhelmed by like, all these guys are like, my kids are struggling with the CFA, Deborah, what should I do? And realistically, there's a different path. What do you think is the best path for
So
that?
always let your principal know, but you can always reach out to us. Teresa is phenomenal in responding to and paying attention to the feedback that she gets from. In fact, that's part of why she's made so many adjustments already this year, because it's been based on feedback that she's getting from teachers. Teresa, do you want to add anything?
So I just want to say this about the math. The reading, I don't think it's as hard, like if you skip a week,
Right.
because it's the same 10 standards. I do want to stress this with the math though. Last year, like our math is really struggling, and we are not going to be at 80% mastery in a week, in a while. We're just not, because we have gaps. And so again, like I shared in the video last week, you know, I had a teacher in 4th grade back when there was SEI classrooms, and every week her kids would only get 16, 17, 21% mastery. She would cry, get so upset. And I was like, you got to keep going on the standards and you got to keep up. And here's why. Our children deserve to be exposed to all the standards. She had the highest growth in the district year after year, regardless of her proficiency, because she exposed them to the standards and she learned how to scaffold math and then pick it up from behind. Because if you're staying on track with at least teaching the grade level standards, the child has not mastered it, you're deciding that week, is this an underlying standard that's going to affect other things that I need to make sure I've got some centers set up, some independent work that they're doing. That is one of the reasons why we wanted social studies and science to be flexible of what kind of projects can the kids be doing so that teacher can be pulling the kids to work with them. If we don't have our teachers stay on pace, and it's at the end of the day, you guys, it's not the skin in my game is to support all of you, and like everything that my team is trying to do is build from the ground up for our students and for you. So you do have flexibility. And so our kids can be innovative as in thinking some problem solvers. But I can't stress this enough. If you walked around and were in a lot of our classrooms, you would see that too many of our teachers get months and months behind on math, because they're always saying that our kids haven't mastered it or they can't do it and they just stay there. And so whatever the decision is, I will honor that, but I will always stick by our children have the right to be taught those standards every week. And that is our obligation to do that. And so I have, even last week, I asked somebody to stay on board with it. And if we're not doing that, then I need to recommunicate my message. Because last week someone was like, I'm a week behind, but they're doing really well with the adding. So I don't think they'll have a problem doing the subtracting. I said, well, could you use your social studies and science time to catch up? Because we're only on week 4. But what happens when you get behind? You keep getting further and further and further behind. I'm just telling you the patterns that I've seen. So as a principal at my school, we did stay on top of teaching each standard a week. If you were more than a week or 2 behind, that's part of the problem when we would come together for DCTMs. No, like everybody was from one end of the United States to the other. So I just think it's hard with math because our math scores continue to struggle, and that's where we can make the most growth. I'm sorry to say, like, I always went after math. It's the wave of the future. I believe that our kids deserve a standard a week, but I'm all right with flexibility. But I do think we need a playground fence of when do we get involved once you're how many weeks behind, and not get involved like to demean somebody or they're in trouble, but just to help them in ways. Even when I send out things like, here's some centers they can use or some ways you can catch up, and when people are like, I'm not going to use those, then like, how do we catch them up? So I don't know. I do think there needs to be some expectations there, especially math.
That's why I say, let your principal know, but also let us know, because if we see a pattern, we can intervene quickly and help.
But if we're not going to do that, then when we're pushing them out, those are going to get further and further lost in your iReady data and hard for the kids to find. So the reason why we were pushing out standards was so that we could take the extra stuff out. But if they're not doing it till weeks later, as long as, and I don't know what it looks like from your end as teachers, are you able to still find it? Are the kids able to still find it? Or does it get lost? I don't know. So I would like feedback on that side.
So, and I think I maybe wasn't clear in what I was describing in terms of the flexibility. If there's a week that you're behind, just let us know. I'm behind, but I'm going to get caught up. And that's why I said in English, it's not an issue. In math, though, we do recognize that because we're having to create different domains for different groups based on the multi-aging or based on what other configurations are out there, again, just let us know so that we can be there to be present and to watch to see what's happening. Why are you behind? Because when I look at our data, Teresa's right. Math is the area that we're really, really struggling. Reading's not great either, but math is a place that we're really struggling. So we want to make sure that people have what they need to be able to identify what students know and are able to do, and then give them the right measures that we can assess where are they and what are the different interventions or extensions that we need to provide for those students to keep them on grade level and above.
Okay, so a follow-up to that, and then Aaron, jump in whenever you want, because I literally will never run out of questions. So I have.
I love it.
So how do you guys, I know how I would handle this, but I know different teachers have different relationships with their admin and where they're at in their teaching careers. How do you guys see like our IEP kids and how they relate to CFAs and the data that we get from them based on where they're at on their grade levels? And is there any plan for them to take maybe a different grade level CFA, or are they always, what are your thoughts on that? I guess would be the easiest way to ask it.
I think it really depends on the child's IEP. So just because a student has an IEP in reading doesn't mean they can't do the math CFA. So we have to be really cautious about that. So I don't think we're going to be able to say, this is the blanket approach. But I do think we have to be mindful of the CFA. Remember that even in the IEPs, our objective is to give students content that is at their particular grade level. Now we can make accommodations and modifications, but that's not changing the standard that they're supposed to be working on. Does that make sense?
Right.
So I would say we're probably not going to have to adjust CFAs, and we probably are not going to have a set of IEP adapted CFAs, but what we will probably look at, and that will be largely with your special education teachers, is there an appropriate modification or accommodation that we need to make for this student with an IEP?
Okay.
And I've been even wondering too, John, like, is it that we should be doing the reading on paper right now? Like, I don't know, when they do it in benchmark and they turn in the assessment, can you see what they highlighted, or you just see their responses?
I know I see the responses for sure, but I don't know if you could see them. I don't know that my kids have been taught the procedure to highlight, so I wouldn't know. They wouldn't have highlighted anyway.
Okay.
In theory.
I'm just wondering if and I don't know, Aaron, your thoughts on that too. So like, I always had the kids like underline like their evidence or like where they got their clues with the number question. So when I was looking at them, like if everybody missed number 4, but they all underline this certain sentence, it'd be like, what about that sentence did it? Because that is one thing that Deborah and I have been talking about too, and our team, is that, we want to make sure that the CFAs that we're given are giving you the information to move forward. And if this is not the right ones, then we need to have those conversations as well. Like, this truly is a building year for us. So like, your voice matters. All the teachers' voices matter. And what evidence is it giving them? And if it's not giving you evidence of what the students can and can't do to move forward, then we need to look at a different assessment that will do that. And I worry about the online reading if they're just clicking an answer. I don't know. Aaron?
Yeah, I've had my students, well, most years I will print the article for the students. And so they answer it on the computer, but they read it on paper so that I can collect it from them.
Yeah.
That was always my solution. I'm sure that there's other teachers with other solutions. I know in other years, I've also made them like show scratch paper that's like, what did you do for your before reading? What did you do during reading? And what did you do for your after reading? So it should have like a summary, should have questions, and then it should have like during reading would be like the main idea sentences and stuff like that.
Well, I'll say as a follow-up to that, I will look into the technology piece that you were mentioning, Teresa, to see if you can highlight. But those are definitely awesome best practices for teachers that if we find out the technology doesn't support highlighting.
Yeah. And then I was thinking like maybe, go ahead.
Sorry, you can highlight for sure in the benchmark. Like you can, I know you can.
Right.
I don't think the teacher can go back and see what each individual student highlighted. Yeah.
And that's where I think the more that we get students in highlighting text and showing what their evidence is, back to what Teresa was talking about, that's information that then helps you understand, how do I customize instruction now for my students for whom this was a challenge? You know specifically what the miscue was and how to correct it.
I will, so going back a little bit to the just general CFA conversation, I wanted to add a little bit to this. Mostly just what I've been hearing around my campus, other teachers, PECTA members about the CFAs. And I'm not sure, I think you guys have kind of answered the solutions for this, but maybe just to kind of have on your radar. I've heard a lot of teachers who are upset about the CFAs because of the 20-minute like direction for them. So, you know, if I spend this, like, this is an example conversation I had. Somebody was like, well, if I give the CFA in my math block for 20 minutes and then I tell them they're done, but my math block's only an hour. So now I don't have quite enough time to do like a lesson and a practice. Like my math block is now much shorter than a normal math block. So just like the time piece of it when their class is not 100% ready. Now, I have communicated to my team that they can spend longer than 20 minutes on the CFA, that like, if you're ready for the CFA, then just give it, like have the kids finish the CFA. I'm not sure if that's the direction from you guys as well, though.
I think most of the things that I heard prior was that all these assessments were too much for them and they needed to be short. And so when we were talking about what the purpose of it was to inform instruction, it's not a summative, so you don't want it an hour. That was the compromise of, since they do 20 minutes of my path each day, if we just cut it off at 20 minutes, it's still giving the teacher information if the children are being successful, and they can use that data for planning. So I'm not going to sit there and say you can't let them go longer, but I also don't want kids to be frustrated that like are struggling or not ready. And, you know, we are open to suggestions. Like, I don't ever want you guys to feel like we're not listening or like we won't take like recommendations of how to fix this thing. I think we were just trying to say, what is the quickest way that we can get solid information aligned to the standard? And so we've been talking like maybe in these platforms, that isn't the best way. We're not sure yet. That's why we need teachers to know that this is a building year and we do need feedback. And now we've said we'll get at the end of instructional cycle 1, so we can kind of have a couple weeks. So I don't know what the balance is on that. Someone was saying the other day, oh, if they don't finish it, they just have to hit an answer anyway, because it won't let you submit. I was like, oh, yikes. But then I was like, is that what you were saying?
That's something I heard today too. The principal told the students that when 20 minutes was up, just continue marking all of the questions with an A and complete it. So
that's what I told them too. And I said,
practice.
Oops, sorry. That's what I said too. And I said, if you have them showing their work on a paper, then you'll know that those are blank. So they didn't finish it and they just guessed, but that's not like the best solution for it. But
yeah, no, I think, you know, if they're not able to do it in 20 minutes, this gets back to what we were talking about earlier. If we're giving them a CFA that they should be able to complete in 20 minutes and they're not able to complete it, they weren't ready for the CFA. So that's where we've got to know, as the week is coming up and as we're teaching these concepts, are they ready for the CFA? Have I taught them how to respond to this? And if the answer is no, it's, you know, if it's no for 4 weeks in a row, we've got other problems. If it's no for 1 week, I think we can manage that, but knowing they're not quite ready, so I'm going to have to double up on this and give them extra time so that they're ready next week for this and the next.
And I'd be curious if it's reading or math or both, because I am concerned about the lengths of some of those passages, you know, so like that might be adjusted.
In my experience, those math CFAs, just because the questions are, the iReady tests or quizzes give the questions in higher level thinking skills.
Yeah.
Rarely is it like, oh, here's an addition question to solve just to check to see if they can solve addition. Almost all the questions are a higher level thinking skill. So those just tend to take the kids a little bit longer. The reading ones, I agree, I would say reading is the longest. Math in my classroom has always taken them at least 40 minutes to complete one of those. I do hear you on if they can't finish it in a reasonable amount of time, they weren't ready for it though. Totally agree with that. I'm just going to throw this out there because I always like to think if I had my ideal perfect world, what would I do? And I don't know where other schools are at. So I don't know if this is a reasonable solution to look for in the future. But because I'm in the position that I'm in this year and I'm leading the PLCs, I can kind of check in with my team and say like, okay, like what CFA are you guys ready for this week? Like the pacing guy says we should be on this one. Are you guys there? Yes or no? And they'll be like, yeah, we're there. Go ahead and assign it. Or no, we're not quite there yet. Let's do it next week. And that way we're like still like, if we're going back to the purpose, it's like, oh, okay, like we're still getting information to guide our instruction as a team, but we're not necessarily like rigidly in line with what the district pacing guide is. Again, I think I'm probably a little bit luckier because I have a full team. Like there's 4 of us that meet. So we have the flexibility to have those conversations. But that's just like my perfect little world. So
And that's the perfect scenario that we want for everyone.
yeah.
So with that being said, would you still recommend that we push them out, that we make them shorter, or that we're allowing the schools to assign them when they're ready? Like what is the full recommendation?
I would say let the teams decide when they're ready for them. So even if a team, like I'm in another position where I can assign their CFAs for them, but even just saying like, oh, well, the 1-2 team here at Edison also meets, like they can just decide in their PLCs what CFA they're taking that week and go back and assign it to their students themselves, rather than having I guess I'm still talking about math because I do appreciate the reading CFAs that you guys created that says skip this question. I very much appreciate that. That is like very in line. I don't think those need to be changed at all. Those are awesome. The math ones, I think, is like when you can have that conversation, like, yeah, we're ready for that standard. Go back to your classroom, assign it to your class. I'll assign it to mine. We'll talk about it next week.
Hi,
So-
I'm so sorry. I know I had to pop out for a second. I was in an IEP meeting and being in like 2 places at once. But something I wanted to bring into the room, and I don't know what this would look like. This is probably more of a problem than a solution, but something that is frustrating to me as a classroom teacher is the online nature of the CFAs. And I understand that like the students will test online, but I can't tell you how invaluable it is when my students are taking any kind of CFA, especially for math though, to be able to see their work. And yes, I know that we can teach them how to show their work, but this last time that did not happen. And so I just know the questions they got wrong, but I have no context to put it in.
Yeah,
So,
we agree. Go ahead, Teresa.
No, I was just gonna say, I agree. I think a paper assessment is, I like to see student work. So anything on paper where I can see student work is much more beneficial.
And I know that it's nice to have that data though from the online. So I'm wondering, like, I don't know, like, but it really, like, it was really sad to be like, okay, well, I guess I just don't have that data.
Marnie, one thing I'll tell you, I saw in another classroom, the students all had little math notebooks. And so while they're doing the CFA, they're writing the problem in their math notebook and solving it and then putting the answer. Now, sometimes there are errors and, I wrote it correctly in my math notebook, but I clicked the wrong button. That was something that the teacher was able to go back and look at what the work was that the students were doing. And she actually brought it to her evaluation meeting to show how this is how she knew where the students were and what they were doing and what miscues they were making so that she could correct them. It was actually really cool to see that.
Okay.
And that was with third graders.
Well, I'm almost wondering too, if it's always going to be the, version A, because I love math notebooks. I am not doing them this year, unfortunately, because with this flexible seating and 30 kids, I have no storage in my classroom at all. So I am doing the best that I can with that, but perhaps if it's always version A, then I could just print out version A and say, okay, you're going to show your work on the paper version, but you're going to answer it on the computer, and maybe that would be the best of both worlds. But it's definitely a concern I have. I know my teammate has the same concern, and I just wanted to bring it into the room anyway.
That's a good idea. And I know we're having a ton of trouble with technology right now. I have no idea what's going on.
But if we modify, just so you know, then if we were to modify that CFA, it doesn't print the same way. So, that would be the rub of that. Like the only way that you can print the same way is if you take screenshots of it. Again, we are unsure if that's the best platform to be pulling them from because of some of these challenges that we've run into.
We are looking.
And then I guess a question that I have, and I don't know, this may have been answered, and I apologize if it was, is that, so what we have some hesitancy from teachers at Emerson anyway, because they look at the standards map and they think that it's saying, okay, so you have a week to teach this standard, and then you're going to give the CFA on Friday. And they're like, well, there's no way I can teach this whole standard. Like, for example, I'll just use fourth grade because I know that one. But this week it is addition and subtraction to any place value. And they're like, that's not possible in a week, which I mean, I would agree with that. I do not think it is possible, but I don't think that's what we're being asked to do either. So maybe just having clarification on what the ask really is with these standards maps.
So Lisa has been going in to highlight the one that's focused. So I'd have to look at fourth grade again, but I know third grade, like last week was the addition part of the addition and subtraction standard. And this week was the subtraction one. I'm sorry, well, 2 weeks ago, what I'm saying? 1 week was addition. The next week was subtraction. And so I had asked Lisa to start going in and highlighting what part of the standard is actually going to be addressed, because sometimes you'll see standards for 2 weeks because like A and B is being addressed in 1 week and C the other. So, again, I think it goes back to that, like trying to make sure that it's aligned, but also like trying to build this together with your feedback so that we're sure that the piece of the standard that's being taught is the one that's being assessed.
Okay. And then the last question I have is specifically from someone who came to me and had just said, that they were feeling overwhelmed, and their fear was, what happens if I get really sick and I'm gone for a couple of weeks? And, I was like, oh my gosh, are you okay? Because that was my first fear. I was like, all right, I hope you're not telling me something right now. But that's, I think it was just an anxiety because, that's the world we live in now. But what happens if you get sick and you're out for an extended time? And we know that the folks that we have, while we appreciate them coming in and covering classes, they're probably not going to be able to keep up with what you've been doing, and are you being held to this? Like, are you like, I guess, is there flexibility? You know, what, I don't know. I think folks are just feeling very, very concerned and scared. And I know, I believe that there probably is flexibility, but I also want to have a better answer than, yeah, probably.
I'd say definitely. Deborah, go
Yeah.
ahead, you can speak.
Yeah, I was gonna say, there's always going to be flexibility as long as Teresa and I are here, because I think one thing that we both come at this work from a teacher perspective first and foremost, and then from an administrator's perspective, and then from a district administrator's perspective last, which probably you shouldn't repeat in front of my boss, but no, I think she has the same inclinations. And people are stressed right now. In fact, I'm texting with a principal right now who had a really bad day. There's so much going on. We don't want to get bogged down in a bureaucracy of, no, you must be, and Marnie, I was saying this earlier, you must be on page 72 because this is the 15th day of the week or the 15th day of the year, and that's what page we're all on. We're never going to be that kind of a district. Our learning should be driven by what our students know and are able to do. And if teachers are feeling stressed to the point of, I may be out for several days, and I'm worried about what's going to happen, if that's, we need to back off and provide some grace and flexibility. But at the same time, we have an equity plan that really focuses on ensuring that every student is getting the highest quality of curriculum and that they're getting the same access to education that others are getting. So we've got to maintain some level of equity across the district. And so if that means let's get extra support for that teacher where we're able to, if that means, you know, let's back off of some of the CFAs, that just has to be an ongoing conversation. And that's where this conversation, we value it so much, because this is where we're going to be able to find that best balance as we navigate another challenging year.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
And maybe it is, I mean, Lisa would kill me for saying this, but you know, maybe it is if the math is what's giving people the most anxiety. But again, that goes back to my fear that teachers are going to stay stuck on one standard until they're at 80% mastery, and we can't do that to move everyone forward. But you know, maybe it is that like we just focus on either the ELA or the Math CFAs this year to get them right, and then we add on the next ones, you know? I mean, I'm more about getting it right and making sure that what we have is something that shows up, that we can look at student work and inform decisions and pull groups. That, you know, this isn't a compliance piece for me. It is really at the core of me believing that we need to make sure that kids have been exposed to all the standards and taught them, but what we do with that afterwards and how we catch them up from behind or pre-teach that, you know, is something that we need to build. That was that same thing with the, you know, social studies and science and wanting kids to be able to do projects so we can really get to a deeper level of thinking and problem solving. You know, there's too many rooms that you walk into and the teacher's up there teaching her little heart out for 45 minutes and then hands it over to the kids, and the kids don't know what to do because they haven't done the thinking and the problem solving.
Right.
So how do we turn that around, you know, to give our kids those opportunities to engage in productive struggle and to be the problem solvers, you know? But
And I love that. I think what resonates with me the most about what you said is that we're trying to get this right. And I think that in some ways communicating that message would probably soothe a lot of fears and a lot of stress, because I mean, I can only speak for myself, but this is my 6th year in this district. And every year that I've been in this district, it seems like we always have a new plan and a new thing, and we're always chasing a new carrot. And it doesn't matter how much I believe in it or how much I want it to happen. It's also like, okay, there's only so much change
Yeah.
that I can accommodate in a year while still doing my job and doing the things that are asked of me and expected of me as a teacher, but then also like, you know, to have something else thrown in on top of it, and you're learning a new curriculum, or you're learning, okay, you know, now we're doing we're learning acceleration, which is great, but it's like, okay, it's another thing, and it feels like more and more and more is being stacked onto plates, but the plates are getting smaller. And I think maybe it could be, if that is a possibility, to either, you know, say, okay, you know what, we're only focusing on one this year, or maybe even saying, what if we did every other week, like 1 week we do a CFA for math, and then the next week is ELA, and doing every other week rather than 2 a week, because I am one of those teachers who saw the 40 minutes and I was like, oh my gosh, my whole plan, what am I going to do? And it's a lot. I do it. I tried. I have to be honest. Our internet was down, so I think 3 of my students were able to do the CFA, but the 3 who did it was valuable information.
Mhm.
And we'll try to get it done this week for the rest of them who couldn't. It would be, I think, really beneficial to have one, to focus on one, or like I said, to alternate, and then maybe figure out a way that we can build in next year to do both, because I see where it's going and I agree with where it's going. I just don't know how to make it work right now.
And
I
I,
think-
go ahead.
Teresa.
Nope, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think that that's a reasonable
Mhm.
request. I think we just need to take a look at it and see how we can make that happen. And we are looking at getting a different tool to be able to use the CFA, a database, an item database that might be helpful for us. But I think the most important thing, Marnie, you're right. We're working to get this right, but in our efforts to get it right, we want to communicate with teachers. We're not about you being right. We're about you showing growth.
Mhm.
And that's true for us as well. We're trying to do things differently. We're trying to think about what makes sense and what's going to best help our teachers get better results, because we know our students are capable of it. We know our teachers are capable of it, but we haven't yet figured out what the right solution is. So as we're working and growing, we want to make sure people understand no one is out to try to get the teachers or even to get the principals. We're really trying to find out how we show growth and how do we support that growth in the long run. So I think that's a reasonable ask.
Well, thank you. And I just want to share too, like, I really appreciate both you and Teresa. I do think that we have, I've seen so many changes at the district level, and I think that this has been a really great one. It's just, I think people are very frightened. And I think, once we really start getting down the road a little more with the GPS and all of that, I think folks will really see that this is more of a culture where, teacher growth is being placed as an important, focus, but that hasn't always historically been the case here. And I think that's where just to give context, I think that's where a lot of anxiety and just frustration come from. And then just on top of it, like, I know you're both aware of this, but it has been really hard last 2 years, actually 3. This is our 4th COVID school year. So I'm
Yeah.
done with it. I would like to opt out of another COVID school year if possible.
Oh, yes, we are going to do it. We're going to rise above.
Yeah.
Hey, really quickly. I don't know,
So-
we weren't actually talking about the GPS, but do you have questions about the GPS? No? Okay.
Not really. I think actually the general consensus seemed, for the most part, there's always like one or two folks that are just going to be grumpy no matter what. But I think a lot of folks appreciated the that there's more, like there seems to be a more of a focus on improvement of teachers and improvement of just your craft in general. And I was so excited to be able to share that, hey, I sat on that committee and that was really a big thing that we pushed for. So as a whole committee.
And it was nice, John, having John on that committee as well. He really represented that voice of, we don't want this to be a dog and pony show. We really want this to be about continuing to grow in our profession. So I do appreciate that perspective. And Teresa did an amazing job pulling this together. Teresa just deserves a lot of accolades, GPS, CFAs, master teachers.
Well, thank you. Can I ask a clarifying question though?
If it's less than 5 minutes.
So I just want to be clear, and I want to know if you want to get feedback from teachers first, because even doing 1 week in ELA and 1 week in math does not solve the issues with math and the pacing guide and getting all the standards in. So there's two ways that we can go forward. I don't have a problem with focusing on one CFA a week. I think it would allow us to do something really well instead of trying to do everything at once. So I don't have an issue with that. So my just question is, do you want to do the back and forth week to week, or do we just want to focus on one subject and getting it right and then building the next one the following year?
So I would maybe want to see about teacher feedback, because I like what you're saying, but then my thought is, what about school sites that are like self-contained, departmentalized? And so not self-contained, but are departmentalized. So for example, like a third grade ELA teacher then is not going to have the CFAs if we just focus on math.
Or vice versa. So you're
Right.
correct. And I've been trying to communicate, you guys, we're all learning and growing together. I'm not collecting this, staring at it. Like, of course, we're looking for places of strength so we can spread it out. But
for sure.
We need teachers to really understand that we want to build these that align to the standard that give them valuable data. So,
Well, and best practice would be that even if you're not doing a district facilitated CFA, like
Right.
you should still be doing common formative assessments, I would hope.
But very few did them last year. I'm just going to be real honest with you all. So,
Yeah, we'll tell
the
you guys.
district is not full of those that stayed on pace or gave regular common and formative assessments. I'm just being honest. So I'm open because I think we're building and I want to build slow, and I get that it's overwhelming and it takes time. So, we can preface it this week if we're creating that they can pick one or the other if that's what we want to do, or we just, I don't know.
Well, I'm thinking before we jump into that, Teresa, let's gather teacher feedback, and then let's pull together with your team and look at what does that look like if we did do every other week. And let's each work on our sides and then come back together. Can we maybe share email conversations or meet again next week?
Yeah, that would be great.
So really quickly, one thought that I just had just to throw out there is that doing if we picked, my question would be, is there an issue that's so inherent to math that if we only spent the year doing ELA, that we would still have that problem if we did math next year? And is there maybe a way, because maybe it's just okay, it's just tough to pace out if we get behind. So maybe if there's a way that we could lower the stakes in math, and maybe we're still giving the CFA, but we're not as we're not as, I don't want to say on them about it, but it's kind of like we're using that as data. So yeah, they're still doing a CFA throughout the year, but we're not as strict about the pacing. And we're just seeing, okay, how's this gonna play itself out? And then we actually are kind of a little more strict about the ELA pacing. Cause I would just hate to do ELA for the whole year. We picked a one and we do
I
it the whole
agree.
year. And then
Yeah.
next year, we're like, oh yeah, math is still a problem because of X, Y, and
Yeah.
Z. And then we wasted a year.
What if we did monthly math CFAs?
Well, they'll have to anyway, because there is like, we did have something come up today that like, I think it was second grade that has like a mid-unit assessment. So I was like, how many questions are on that? Can we pare it down and have one of each that they do it in place of the CFA? So, you know, there were things that we were going to reach out to get some information from. So there is, not all of them have mid-unit assessments, only the longer units, but then you're at a summative as opposed to a CFA.
So yeah, let's each gather input from our different groups.
Yeah.
Start brainstorming and come up with something and maybe meet next week.
Mhm. And if you just communicate them,
Or-
this is about them doing them so we can gain information about what information they are getting from it.
I know we're gonna come up with something brilliant.
That's the good news. Is that
Right.
I know
That is
it's
the
gonna be
good news.
brilliant.
It may
We just
not
have to
be
figure out how to
today.
get there.
But next week, it's gonna be there. You guys are gonna get. All right, well, I know it's almost 5:15. Are you guys all coming tonight?
Online, unless you want me down there, I'll drive on down.
No, you can. Do it.
This will be the first one I can't make it to, but I plan to make it to all of them that I can. I've been pretty good, but I can't do it tonight. And I'm so sad because I had a really great community comment and I was going to be like, oh, thank you for all the hard work that the district did. And I didn't email it. So now, I don't know, maybe I should.
Oh, that's okay, because this is study session, so bring your.
Oh, it's just a study session. Okay, well
Yeah,
then there is
yeah.
no community comment.
Yeah,
Okay.
bring it on the
Well,
20
good, because it was great and it was very nice. And I was saying thank you for all the hard work that they did stuffing all those envelopes, because I know that took a long time and a lot of work. So,
Yes.
all right, well, great.
was all
Thank you both
Crystal.
so much for having this meeting with us. And I can reach out maybe later this week to, I don't know, to do Tuesdays work. Typically, if we keep it a little shorter.
Yes, for
Yeah, I
me.
think I mean, we're here.
That's true. That's true. All right. Well, I'll reach out and try to schedule one so we can kind of follow back up, and then let us know if there's anything that we can do to be helpful in the meantime.
Well, you guys, we appreciate the partnership and the work together to try to figure out the best solutions for our teachers and our kids. So thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, we appreciate you guys.
Have a good one.
Bye.
Bye.
Guys, thanks
Bye.
for everything.